welcome to Tea Time with Jesse. I'm your host Jesse, and we're here today with two fantastic guests. We have my friend Mohammed Magdi.
Hello.
And Annie Louey.
Hi.
Both of whom are comedians here out in the Asian comedy scene. And so, Mohammed, I've known you for years and years and years.
Yeah, I think it must have been 10 years at least.
Yeah.
I started in 2013. When did you start?
I started in Asia in 2012, but
Yeah.
that was really like my professional start doing comedy was also around then. So it was
Right.
it was 2012. Mohammed was always in the Shanghai scene, and I was in the Beijing scene. So whenever you were in Beijing, I'd see you up performing.
Yeah.
And whenever I go to Shanghai, and then ultimately to the Hong Kong scene.
Yeah.
And then Annie is in the Australian scene. It's just like a really great coincidence that all three of us are in Taiwan at the same time.
Yeah.
And I was like, hey, I really want to hang out with you guys and have tea. And then I realized like, oh, I actually have like two comedians I can have on the show, which
Yeah.
is which
So
is
we
great.
met in China, and then I live in Hong Kong, and
Yeah.
we're now in Taiwan. So we never really left China.
Yeah.
Anyway.
And I'm the Chinese person who's never lived here. And I'm like learning Mandarin right now.
Yeah. So this
Oh
is
my
yeah.
God.
So who speaks better Mandarin?
He does now.
Oh, that's
actually.
so funny.
Yeah.
That's hilarious.
I think she knows more words, but I'm more like fluent in
Yeah.
like
Yeah. And
daily
he
stuff.
has the confidence.
Yeah.
So that with a lot of things you can just pull it off.
Oh, yeah.
If you go in, even if it's wrong, with
Yeah.
confidence.
That's true. It's actually very important to know. People are always your Chinese must be so good. It's like, no, I'm willing to be wrong.
Yes.
That's
Which
actually
is more acceptable, to be fair to us, like to
Yeah.
her even.
Yeah, you
Like,
have it
it's more
hard.
acceptable for us because they're like they expect us to make
yeah,
mistakes.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
But then I don't know if I
Yeah.
can say this on record,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
like they think she's retarded most
Oh,
of
yeah,
the
yeah.
time.
You can't say.
It's like the record as if there's like some very important somebody's like taking notes and be like, it's on paper
It's
now.
my favorite moment of every day, being like someone is like, "Hey, why don't you speak?"
Does this happen to you guys where like you're like people are coming up and talking to you and you say something in Mandarin, they turn to you?
Yeah,
and say
yeah,
it.
exactly.
Yeah.
That
On the
happens.
plane around.
That
Yeah,
happens.
he couldn't have pork in his meal, and they kept talking to me, and I'm like, don't talk to me.
Yeah. and then like, I have tons of questions. Before we get started with the questions, we'll
Yeah.
have a great time. I do want to make some tea.
Yay.
So I have this is a Taiwanese, an Oolong tea from here in Taipei. I went a couple days ago to Malkong, which is like you should actually do it while you're here.
Yeah.
You take a gondola up to the hills, you get a view of the whole of Taipei, and they actually grow tea up on the hills, like
Nice.
right near Taipei.
Yeah.
And so this is going to be a nice dark roasty oolong. Give this a try. Annie, do you drink a lot of tea?
Yes, I grew up drinking lots of tea, including caffeinated tea, I reckon, from the time I could walk.
Oh, yeah?
So tea does nothing to me from a
Tea does nothing to
caffeine
me.
perspective. But yeah, definitely grew up drinking a lot of oolong tea. Some of my other favourites would be chrysanthemum, peppermint as well, because
Nice.
I have a lot of gut-related issues
Yeah.
and there's a lot of good properties
Yeah.
with digestion when it comes
Nice.
to tea.
Yeah, because it's one of those things, like I'm always interested in the sort of Chinese communities overseas, outside of China. It seems like sometimes the tea culture goes and sometimes it doesn't. And it probably depends on where the people were when they moved out of China. You know?
Yeah.
So but like within the Australian Chinese community, like the tea is still definitely a thing.
Yeah, especially with the British influence. So
Mm-hmm.
colonized by the British, everyone loves having a cup of tea, and I reckon it's 50-50 coffee to tea drinkers. And also
Really? That's very high for
it
tea.
is very high for tea.
We actually have people that like order tea from Australia, and I feel really bad because they have to pay a ton of shipping. But on the other hand, I'm like, that is literally not my fault. Your island is too far.
Yeah.
You know, that may not be my fault.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm always working to figure out a way. I'm not looking into seeing if I can get a warehouse there, but it's like it's madness.
Yeah.
So you
here we go.
import your tea from China, and
Yeah.
then you bring it to the U.S. and then distribute it?
Yeah, so what
Okay.
I do is I have, including the tea tables and stuff, like one of my advantages
Thank
is that
you.
I actually bring it all over on a boat. And so we save a lot of money, and so we can give people more and better quality tea for the same
Does it go
amount.
both ways, tea just one way and then refugees the other way?
Yeah, from refugees to where?
Yeah, no, I mean to the U.S.
Oh, yeah. Basically, like we just put the same people on the same boat.
All right, okay.
Because we have
that
a
is
boat.
good there.
we
good
just
save
we
there.
just keep it like moving.
Yeah.
The important thing
Keep
is
it
it's
moving.
moving. Just keep it moving, people. So cheers, keep it
Yay,
moving.
cheers.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for
Thanks
meeting
for
up in
having us.
Taiwan. Here we
Yeah.
go, guys.
You
Cheers.
didn't cheers me.
Yeah, here you
Okay. You're supposed to look in each
There we
other's
go.
eyes.
There you
Yeah.
go.
Isn't it like with
Yeah,
alcohol
yeah.
only?
Is it alcohol and tea?
I have
don't
no
know.
idea. This is our alcohol now. Both of us don't drink.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's
Yeah,
yeah.
give me that hit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this has a little smokiness to it. It's
Ooh,
really
that's
going to
nice.
come out.
Very clean.
Yeah, that's the thing. So the Taiwanese oolongs, basically what I'm doing on this trip is I'm doing like a Taiwan mystery drop. Like I don't know exactly what I'm going to be putting on the shop, but we have like a mystery drop option if people want to like get some of whatever I'm going to
That's
be picking
really
up. And
nice.
this is up on that list. I think this might be
Yeah.
one of the things in the drop, if not the drop. So
Yeah, he did not tell me to say this, but this
no,
is
it's just good.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. The Taiwanese oolong is like known for being really clean tasting because the environment here is really good. And,
It's funny, there's a lot of similarities. I used to work for a coffee company for a
yeah?
while, and there's a lot of similarities even in the terminology when you're like describing like taste notes and stuff like this with coffee.
I had to relearn all my adjectives in English to tell people what the tea was like because I learned all my tea stuff in Chinese.
That's so funny.
So I went up
Yeah.
and people were saying people knew all these words I didn't know in English. They're like, "What's the terroir?" I'm like, "The what?" The TERROIR is like the place and environment in which the thing is made. It's like a French word.
It's so funny. It sounds like because you speak in like Beijing Hua.
Oh my
yeah,
God.
yeah. It sounds like you're still saying it in Chinese.
Terroir,
Yeah,
like a
I thought it
very-
was Chinese. Actually. It's not? Okay.
That's like my French accent is so bad. You thought I was speaking Chinese. I'm like, this is ridiculous. Anyway, but so it's really great. I basically just kind of made this trip to Taiwan a little bit on a whim. Because I was, I hadn't been back here since before the pandemic, and so it's good to be tied back into the world that I used to live in, where I would be hanging out with comedians in Asia and doing comedy shows. So, Mohammed, you just did a show here at 2-3 Comedy last night, which was awesome. He killed it. If you guys should definitely follow both of their channels if you want to see the laughs. But what was it like performing in Taiwan? Like, how did you feel the audience was?
It was great. I did Taiwan, different, like same promoter but different venue 7 years ago. That was my first time in Taiwan, 2017. He ran a basement, like a show in a basement of a bar. Now he has his own comedy club. Shout out to Sam Yars. And I was very excited because all the comics who played that club said it's like such a beautiful venue and stuff. I was just excited to see it.
That's
I've run shows for years. So just like from a booker's point of view, I just wanted to see the room.
Yeah.
So to play the Taiwan audience, honestly, probably the nicest audience in Asia. They're so giving, as opposed to fucking Koreans who never laugh.
Which Korea?
Actually, I would probably have better luck in North Korea.
Dude, can you imagine like
South Korean audience just bad.
It just didn't work, and then you're like, well, we have another Korea.
Exactly.
Also, you're Egyptian. You might be able to get in. I don't know.
Oh yeah. I think I can get in. Yeah.
You know what? Actually, I bet you'd kill it in North Korea because the moment they knew you were coming, they would make a fake audience just to laugh at
Yeah. I should shoot a special there.
you. Yeah.
Live from the Gulag.
Live from in Pyongyang,
But yeah, honestly, probably the nicest audience in Asia is Taiwan. And so much, just like they're great. Because a lot of my references are based on my experience in China and Hong Kong. So that's like the third part of that.
It was really fun
trio.
to see that for me because I have all these jokes, whether in English or Chinese, about life in China.
Yes.
And then here in Taiwan, when I got here, I was like, well, what do I say? Do I say I was in China? Do I say I was in Beijing? Do I
Right.
And I just like the way you dealt with it. It was just like, I lived in China and here's stories about that was happening to me in China.
Exactly.
And that's like, that's definitely the easiest way to deal with this.
Yeah. But because obviously like almost all of my touring experience has been in Asia in general, so I kind of know how to talk to the Asian audience, and but because Taiwan is so close to China, like culturally or geographically and all of it, it's just easy to play this to this audience. And I was having a lot of fun.
It looked like you were having fun.
Yeah, I was like, it was one of these shows where like, I can just relax and just be myself, and they're on board.
That's good.
That's
yeah,
great.
and that's like I really like miss it from being now in the LA and like the Hollywood scene.
Yeah,
it's like it's almost like when I talk about my life in Asia, people are like, "Oh, that's a great niche you got." I'm like, that was my life. Like I didn't choose it as a niche to make money or anything or make it in the industry. It's like. It almost seems there. It's like I don't know if it's similar in Egypt probably is more likely than Australia. But like if you go back to Egypt and you said you lived in Asia, do people think you're just like showing off or something like that?
Yes, yeah. A lot like I don't go back to Egypt that often, but when I go and I actually avoid talking about like anything But it's also because the economy there is so bad.
Yeah.
That it sounds like I'm bragging
That's the
by
other
living
thing.
in a very rich country like Hong Kong.
Yeah.
Province, sorry.
Yeah, how about
Yeah.
Well, the money is. It's funny you talking about money, but yeah, it does kind of make a little bit of sense. I think it's. And now that you think about it, it's not like the wealthy, well-off people in the States that are like thinking like, oh, you're showing off, you lived in Asia. It's usually the people I think who would want to travel to Asia and can't.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah.
And so it's like, that's why I always feel a little bit bad about it, because I'm like, I don't feel like I should just like flame on these people. But it's also like, I also don't want to, like, I want to talk about my life, and I spent a lot of time there, you know? So it's, what is and then Annie, you also performed last night. What did you feel like the audience was like here?
Yeah, I feel like it's such a good melting pot, and they're so international. So one of the reasons why I want to come to Asia is to level up my comedy and make it more relatable to lots of different audiences. The first time I came to Asia to do gigs, I was on some of the shows that Mo was running, and I realized some of the references were just completely unrelatable to Hong Kongers. Like I have material about driving, and people don't drive because you have to be really rich.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
and like it's like classic LA shtick is like traffic jokes. It's like, oh my god.
Yeah.
But like, you know, but it's here, like, weirdly enough, it almost would be bragging here to be taught. Like in Hong Kong, you're like, I got stuck in traffic the other day, and it's like, did you?
Yeah.
Did you really? Tell me more about
Yeah.
how hard it is having your fucking BMW and.
Yeah. So I feel like it's a success from having grown since June to come, and every joke I know is going to work because it's so universally relatable. So it's like starting again. I'm like stripping back to, okay, you got like 15 maximum relatable minutes in Asia, and then to grow again and find hopefully an hour out of this would be really great.
That would be really cool.
Yeah.
So and then in terms of the audience, like, you know, tell people, who did you see in the audience? Like, was it all Taiwanese people? Was it all Americans? Like, who was there?
Pretty mixed.
Yeah, it was a good mix, I would say. I mean, from visually from the stage, I would say it was about 50% locals, 40% maybe. And then obviously, you can sometimes mistake, like there was a Korean person, for example, last night. And, you can mistake her for a local if you're not paying attention.
Sure.
So, yeah, I would say 40-50% Asians.
Yeah.
And then the others are, like, mixed.
Yeah.
Right? And the one black guy, of course.
Oh, yeah, the
because
one
you
black
have
guy.
to have it.
Who was the same black guy in the audience?
That was a
7
joke.
years ago?
But there was,
was it? I don't know.
I'm glad you actually bought it.
Yeah,
but,
Mohammed was like, he saw this one black guy in the front row. He's like, it's the same guy from 7 years ago. And then he didn't fight.
No, he didn't fight. The reason being also, that was kind of an inside joke between me and the booker as well, because 7 years ago, there was one black guy in the audience. Different guy. And I almost did the same joke. It was like, where are your black people in Taiwan? And I checked with the local openers as well. 3 people, and I'm like, if I say there is not a lot of black people in Taiwan, would people agree? And he said, absolutely.
Okay.
So that's why I did it. I'm like, oh yeah, the one black guy's here.
That's
and then
funny.
everyone was laughing.
Whereas he did this similar joke in Australia, and it got really tense.
Oh, that was
because,
so funny.
It was around the time, because we've got an indigenous population, but they've kind of been driven out of the cities for various like oppressive reasons by white Australia. So where he's like, where do you put all your black people? We're like, ugh.
Well, turns out I didn't know. I was genuinely asking.
I was really curious where you put them all.
Yeah, but not just that. I was
Weird.
actually asking about the actual black people, like the
African.
Oh, yeah.
Africans.
Yeah.
Turns out they call their indigenous people black.
No.
Yeah, so it was like a.
It was on the weekend that we had a vote as well. We had a referendum. So
when they told them to fuck off, by the way.
Well, yeah, whether they should be heard in Parliament and have a say, and we actually voted no.
And the answer was no.
Yeah, the answer was no.
We have listened to you and decided not to listen.
Yeah, exactly. We have heard your, we have heard your cries, and we decided we don't give a shit.
Yes, we literally, like, I see your tears, but I'm also thirsty.
Yeah, so you've got a 5-minute set.
I'm
You
so
would
thirsty.
kill in Australia.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, so that was completely misinterpreted.
Well, so here's the thing that I always find fascinating is, like, how do you go about deciding when you go to Asia what jokes you are and aren't going to tell, knowing that you're an Egyptian guy in Hong Kong, whatever, you're Australian Chinese now performing last night in Taiwan. What's the calculus you go through to decide what you're going to say? Or what you're not going to say?
I mean, I like opening all of my shows in Asia by pointing out that all Asians look the same. And then we start from there. And it's so far I've been doing
And
it
it
every
works?
single time. It works 100% of the time. What about you, Annie?
I don't start my sets off by offending the audience. I like to have them on my side. But yeah, I feel in Asia, especially with the background I have as diaspora, we still have lots of relatable topics like family, like traditional cultural values. So I think, yeah, leaning into that and having like strict or traditional parents has always been, ever since I was a teenager, that was like my way to get it out on stage, like any frustration. So I think that still works. A lot of people are probably, feminists like me now, the young people, they're pretty liberal. So I think they understand that, like, dating stories, family tension, embarrassing, like cringe, kind of cathartic therapy type comedy, which just seems to work everywhere. So yeah, that's been something that I've found, it doesn't really matter where you go. You can just speak from your personal experience.
Everybody has been wounded by their parents. So
Right.
so it's like a thing. That's really funny. But the like in terms of the stage, like, what did it feel like to be in Taiwan specifically? Like, because you're mostly based out of Hong Kong, you're mostly based out of Melbourne, right?
Yeah.
So like Taiwan's a different place for all of you. Did you do any Taiwan specific jokes?
Yeah, last night, because obviously I was headlining, so I did like 45 minutes, and there was a few things where I just kind of drew comparisons, because a lot of my experiences in Hong Kong and mainland. So again, having Taiwan as kind of the third part of that trio, it was interesting.
It's almost like, joke, tag, and then you just had another free tag.
Exactly.
That's
That's
cool.
exactly right, because, for example, I have a couple of references to how rich Hong Kong is.
Yeah.
And I just called people in Taiwan poor.
Yeah.
And it was funny.
It was funny.
Yeah,
It was
yeah.
also like one of those moments where it's like, because again, I lived in Beijing, and Beijing's a wealthy place generally.
Exactly.
Although there's up and down. Hong Kong is like basically, very, very wealthy. You kind of have to be wealthy just not to die.
Yes.
And then in Taiwan, it's like, it's so funny because the quality of life here is very high.
Yes.
But they're not rich.
No, they're not rich.
It's like one of the things that's like a little bit of like a weird thing coming from the States is like, in America, if you made an income similar to what they make in Taiwan, you would not be doing well necessarily. But then when like I'm in the neighborhood where I just like got my my hotel, there's like this beautiful park that is like, if you were in LA and you live next to that park, each of these houses would be worth $3 million.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's just a park.
Yeah.
But they just have nice public spaces. They have nice transit. Everything is just generally clean. There's no trash anywhere on the streets. They don't even have trash cans on the streets, if you notice.
Really?
Right.
Oh,
You're
it's like
personally
Japan.
responsible for your trash.
Yeah.
Yes.
So you have to take it. You have to take it like to your house and put it in a trash can and then go and throw it out. So like these little things, it's like it doesn't cost money to do that.
Yes.
But it seems like a lot of that stuff runs clear here. But at the same time, clearly, like, people are not rich.
No. And I think it's also like, at least from my experience, pandering to the audience is not really fun. So it's so easy to be like, oh yeah, China's like this or whatever. But I actually want to play the opposite when I'm like, oh yeah, no, you guys suck. They are great. And that's not actually what I think. I just think it's funny to take the other side, as opposed to like, doesn't China suck? And you guys are awesome. Like, no, actually, China's way richer than you, and it's a little bit more fun too.
It also kind of allows you to live a little bit closer to reality, which is like whatever you want to say politically, who the hell knows? But like, there's more money in China than Taiwan.
For sure.
And in Hong Kong. And it's like, in the pandering, it's like, for me, like, I don't like the pandering either, but the thing I really dislike about it is I feel like I've created this fake world that we're living in just tonight.
Yes.
And the more complicated your fake world is, the more you have to think about everything you said forever, and wondering if it's breaking something in the fake world.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
And
you don't want to go against the thing that you just created.
Yeah, like
by saying sometimes your real opinion.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so and so I think that's kind of where, like, for me, the fun of doing the shows in the other cultures are like, what can I do? What can I say that's authentic? That's but I also am like, I don't like offending the audience the first joke. Like, You're much more strong-willed.
Oh, I don't know. That was 10 minutes ago, but if someone is still watching that in completion, that was a joke. You guys have seen me do. It's funny how neither of you corrected me. Like, that was a joke. I was being silly.
But so it's great to be able to see us going forward. forward. I want to talk a little bit about the comedy scenes in Hong Kong and Australia.
Yeah.
Maybe starting with Australia here, what's the Melbourne comedy scene like?
Yeah, it's really big. It's bigger than any of the Asian cities. We have one of the biggest comedy festivals in the world. So it's up there with Montreal and Edinburgh Fringe as well. So people come and it's open access. You can just pay a fee, get a room and start doing shows. So this year is going to be, I think, my 6th time doing the festival. And we're doing a split bill together. So it's the first time I'm actually sharing the stage with someone else, because usually with a split bill show it's like when you're starting out, you go and you do it with a friend and you cut the costs, but for us it's like a way of leveling up as well, because he hasn't come to Australia before, so he can ride off the back of my connections, and me, as we've decided, I'll go second each time, so it's like I'm the headliner in that case. But we got the best venue for the festival, which is the Melbourne Town Hall, so that's always huge because people think that is the entire festival, like that little spot. I don't know, people have wacky...
You have to play to the ignorance.
Yeah, exactly.
Everything starts with accepting that most people are ignorant, and you gotta start from there. But that'll be a great venue. How many seats?
We are doing a little 65,
69, 70, I think, 70.
That'll be so much fun.
So we're keeping it very
great.
small,
That'll
and
be a lot
I
of
actually
fun.
predict that we might sell out the whole run, hopefully, like before.
Well, I would much rather have a smaller venue full every night than like do a whole bunch of shows to 70 people in a 200.
That's exactly what I told her as well.
Yeah, you'll just enjoy your life. Why suffer? Why suffer?
Yes.
I did a lot of shows in colleges. Back when I lived in China, I would come back to the States and do college shows, and sometimes you get a really nice room, but they would have 40 people in a space for 300.
Yes.
And then other times you'd be in literally a lecture hall, but there'd be 80 people in a place for 30, and it was electric. It didn't matter that it was literally a lecture hall.
Yes.
It was just you'd be able to kill it.
It's a much better way to brand it as well as the first few shows sold out.
Yeah.
Even, of course, there's always a marketing, tricks to it, just like anything else. When you go all right, we sold out the first 5 nights. It's actually a 40 seater, but who gives a shit?
Yeah, but that's
people
fine.
you give people some
I want to be in the sold out show.
Exactly.
I want to go, but I can't.
You give people some FOMO, which is why promoters, including myself, do whenever you sell out a show, you just make a big deal out of it.
Even though that's technically you're not selling any tickets, but you're selling tickets the next time.
Exactly. And there is no better feeling for a promoter than turning people away at the door. That's the best feeling ever.
Can't do it.
We would like to take your money, but we can't.
I just can't do it.
Yes.
Cannot.
Yeah.
Sorry. And then you slap them just to get them out of the way. No. So you're going to be in Melbourne then. And so for the Australian comedy material, in the States, I think one thing that surprised me is so much is about race and so much is about kind of the melting pot culture. And Australia is also, I think, a little bit similar to the States in that there's an indigenous population that has mostly been shunted to the side, and then people from around the world took over this continent. And so I wonder whether it's similar.
People talk about Melbourne as if it's China. They're like, oh, I came to Melbourne, I thought I was coming to Australia. It's actually China, because there's just so many Asian faces on the street. But it means that, I don't think it's filtered up towards the broader TV networks diversity yet. So that's the thing. We still have a handful of Chinese or Asian comedians floating around. So I feel like it's still a good place to, a small pool to perform to, which is why it's a good challenge to be here, where the audience all looks like you and they see comedians like me all the time. So you actually have to be good. You can't just focus on just the race stuff. And also it's really helpful to not have to focus on race all the time, because I think when you're starting out, that's the expectation. You think you should write just jokes about why you look like this. But it's been liberating, even talking to him yesterday, do I need to explain that I'm Australian, or can I just do the jokes? And he was like, just do the jokes, because they're kind of used to it here. They see lots of people with different accents who have an Asian face. So I'm like, okay, that's a relief. I don't need to go write new jokes about that, because I kind of just want to talk like I'm a normal person, because I'm always going to be Chinese Australian in everything that I do. Like I can't even
I mean, let's
remove
face it, with that accent, you don't sound like a normal person.
Fuck you.
Remember in your bit last night, you were talking about your mom got upset at something, and she's like, my mom went nerd.
Exactly.
Okay, great. Let's pile on now.
Sorry. It was funny. Somebody told me that it was like I did a bit in Chinese about the Boston accent, and the Boston accent is that there's no R's. You don't say ah.
Yeah.
So like you have park my car and have it, yeah, whatever, that sort of thing. And somebody was like, oh, it's like they thought it sounded a lot like the Australian accent because the other part of the Boston accent is you add the R onto stuff that it shouldn't have.
Like China.
You're China.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, like, you're in China. Whatever.
Yeah.
No, they say we talk like this and not articulate because there's too many flies in Australia. So people like to keep, they keep their mouths like really closed. So they're like, yeah, mate, yeah, this is really nice, yeah.
Man, we were side rant here, but we were in like an Airbnb in the middle of nowhere in Australia. Where were we?
Which one?
With a
so many
freaking
random...
spider.
Oh, yeah, there was, we were out, like where it's like the meat pie capital, like they have really good beef there, so it's called Gippsland.
Yeah, whatever,
Yeah.
bumfuck Australia, basically, and we're sleeping in an Airbnb, and stepping off the bed, going to the bathroom, and there is basically a spider that's just out of a Steve Irwin documentary.
Yeah, like
Just
the size of a plate.
And what is it called?
Yeah.
The carpenter
No,
thing? What is it
no,
called? You told me the
Now
name.
you're confusing me, and I'm not going to be able to remember it.
It's like there were so many massive spiders on that
Yeah,
trip.
there
I
are
can't
a lot of
remember
I don't know if you do
Spiders in
graphics
Australia.
here, but it's right here. And then
Yeah.
Anyway, gigantic. And I was like...
Was it one of those ones with like the health bar on it? Have you seen that? Have you seen that picture?
I've not seen that, but it's
like
quite
a
funny.
meme with somebody's like the spiders in Australia are so big they have health bars. It was just a spider, but it happened to be like high up on the ceiling, right underneath like a red strip on the wall,
Oh,
and
that's
it looked
funny.
exactly like
like video game.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I was like, I've never seen anything like this. I'm like, oh yeah, that's Australia for you. And then like we had to like scoop it with a Tupperware and make sure don't touch it, and then like take it
So
outside.
it turns out it wasn't poisonous.
It wasn't poisonous, but at the
You didn't
time
know
you
that.
think
You didn't know
Yeah.
that.
exactly.
This is something that you can find out later.
Yeah.
This is,
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
is not
I'll
an
find you the
album.
name. It'll come to me later. You just literally give it
Yeah.
a plug.
Yeah.
The spider.
Give it a plug. Yeah.
Yeah.
Follow
Where
the spider on social.
Where are you performing?
Follow
Like,
the
what
spider.
dates are you doing?
God, the like it's getting to that point though. I feel like all these people run these like pet accounts. You know those things like you've seen like somebody's
Yes.
like pet is their whole thing, and I was like, there must be somebody who has a spider account. Like,
Oh, yeah.
it's like some
Absolutely.
sort of
Yeah.
giant like spider clawing up on their hand. And
There's
like,
all kinds of weirdos.
Or
Like,
like some-
I have a dog back in Hong Kong. I've had her for a long time. And don't have an account for her, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But the point is that I hang out with a lot of other dog owners.
Yeah.
And some of them, they're like, yeah, follow my dog. I'm like, no, that's you.
The dog follows
Yeah.
you. Have you forgotten the way that the dog? That's funny. If I ever had a spider account, okay. Here's a question: If you had a pet spider, do you put the leash around the big part or around the leg?
Definitely the big
If you were
part,
walking it.
right? The body.
But it seems like it would slip off.
I feel like the big part would be squishy and you might like kill it. And the legs are like
true.
stronger.
I think you might need 8 individual leashes for each little leg, and then you're like,
That would. I think that's actually the play. Somebody needs to make this like weird 8-leash spider
Yes.
thing with the 8 tiny little loops.
Yeah.
And then the string.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're giving away great ideas for free here on the
Yes.
podcast.
And jokes. You've written like 5 great spider jokes, right? Yeah.
I have to figure out a way to transition. So this is the thing though, is like what you said spoke to me about this idea of like, you know, not having to play your race when you do the show. Because for many years in China, I was doing Chinese comedy. I have to address that I'm the white guy doing comedy. And then when I went to LA, it was in some ways freeing to be back into the majority group, but in other ways it was like I look normal, but I feel still completely unnormal because all of my life experiences from the past decade were somewhere else. And as I said, hey, well, I was in China, and people are like, oh, are you bragging? I'm like, no, I'm trying to tell a story. For me, it's just a story. Like, how do you get around that sort of? It's almost like you have benefits to both and problems to both.
That's hard. It reminds me of Andy, our friend's experience.
Yeah,
Of having,
you are also familiar.
Andy,
with
yeah,
it.
you heard, yeah.
having performed
Yeah.
in Asia and then gone back to Australia, and they just couldn't relate to the.
Yeah.
I'm a white man who lived in China.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Material.
Yeah. I don't, for me, it's because I'm not performing in my native country. So for me, that's gonna be the experience anywhere that is not Egypt. And even when I am in Egypt, I will be talking about China. So I accepted that I am a foreign act everywhere I go for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
Like unless I'm in Egypt talking about Egypt in Arabic. But that's not gonna happen because I have no experience anymore because I've been away for so long.
Yeah.
So the point is that I go to Australia, I'm an Egyptian guy who's living in China. I go to China, I'm an Egyptian guy who's living in China.
Yeah.
That's still weird. I go to Taiwan, it's the same thing.
Well, that was one of the things in China, like that I kind of realized is like, because I did lots of different cities in China, and there's a big difference between Beijing, Shanghai, Hong Kong,
Exactly.
first tier city they call first tier, and like I performed in Taiyuan, I performed in Nanning, I performed in like all of these other places, and sometimes people are like, oh well, like do you have to adapt your material? I'm like, I probably should, but I'm just as weird there as I was in
Exactly.
Beijing.
Yeah.
So
So that's something you and I have in common. It's just like you will never be just like a regular act anymore because of how your life turned out. And so to me that's actually very liberating because I know then that I can go perform tomorrow in Lithuania and be like another foreign guy.
I did perform in Lithuania.
Oh, there you go. That's funny.
I performed at Vilnius University.
In Chinese?
In English. Well,
Oh, nice.
I did in English shows there, but I did Chinese shows in Paris and London.
Nice.
And there were actually enough Chinese in like Latvia that I was like, you could have pulled this off.
I mean,
don't know why they're
there's
all
enough
there.
Chinese everywhere. I don't know.
Yeah.
That was one of the cool things I feel is like, if you have some sort of Chinese culture, there's Chinese everywhere. You can always pull off something in Chinese. And,
I'm amazed that you're not constantly touring the world properly because you can literally go to every country on earth, find 50 Chinese people and do a show.
I gotta get a promoter. You gotta,
I'll hook you up with some people in
I think it'd be
Africa.
fun. I got to get back on the road. I think the
Yeah.
thing was that it was like I had such a shock from COVID of going from like 300 shows a year, always performing, to no shows for a year and a half.
Yeah.
And I honestly feel like I just kind of like lost the
Momentum.
yeah, no, it's not even momentum, not the drive, not the momentum, like the habit. I'm just distractible. Like if you get in a habit of like, flossing every morning, you'll floss every morning for 3 or 4 months, and then you drop the habit, and all of a sudden it'll be like 2 years, and your dentist is like, did you floss anytime in the last 2 years? Like,
Yeah.
Like, so I got to move on that. So that was one of the fun things about seeing both of your shows is like being like, okay, like, this is, I got to get back on the horse. I got to get back.
I
to
love
doing more
doing shows like this as well because like the openers, everyone was so good that like I literally told them before going up, I'm like, you guys, thanks for the pressure. This is like this is gonna be.
But yeah, the openers did really well.
Yeah,
which is it's always a little bit of a double-edged sword. You don't want the opener to do too good.
I personally I like it because
like
that makes me like if you're touring a lot or if you're like feeling confident, like you can get complacent. And I've had shows when I'm like, oh, I'll be fine, I'm the headliner, and then I'm like, I wasn't ready.
Yeah,
you know.
yeah.
But last night I'm like seeing everyone kill so hard. I'm like, oh yeah, I have to bring it because otherwise there is no worse feeling than being buried by your openers. That's not fun.
true.
But I
That's
think
true.
from the opener's perspective, something that's changed that's helped me in the last few months is to, no matter where you are on the spots, just treat yourself as if you've got headliner energy.
Yes.
And that has like shifted my whole mentality. Like I was talking in a green room in Sydney with a very proficient MC. She's been doing it probably for like 20 years. And she just said that just, like, she used to be very demure about it. She's like, I can't be better than the headliner. So she was deliberately holding back.
Oh, that's not.
Yeah, she's doing that for
bury the
years.
headliner.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I think it does elevate the whole show, and then you can go home if you're the headliner who's like, oh, I stunk. Like you just got to be better. And
Yeah,
that's
you
part
gotta
of
be better.
Yeah.
So that's the good. I think that was the thing that I really love about comedy, and that I kind of have tried to take into other things is like, you got to be good every night. You got to earn it every night, and like. There's no oh, like you weren't funny, but you were funny 20 years ago. So like the audience doesn't care. You need to do it that night.
Exactly.
And so it's kind of brutal, but it's also very healthy. It's like tied to reality. It's like, what does it matter if you were on a famous show 5 years ago if you didn't bring it tonight? These people pay to see you tonight. They didn't pay to see you 5 years ago. So.
Yeah. And it's this thing when it's like, even if you see someone whose like name is like a household name, you get excited for like 3 minutes, and after that, it's like, all right, where are the jokes?
If they're good, if they better have some jokes. So
Yeah.
Well, let's take a quick break, and we're gonna reheat our water so we can get some more juice out of these leaves, and we'll keep talking about the comedy in Asia. I'm Jesse.
Annie?
I'm going to do blow. Mohammed.
What? Okay. All right. Whoa. It's time for battle with a new fun mobile game, Battle of Battles. Battle your friends, your enemies, and even other battles. And maybe after your 10th, 100th, or 1000th battle, you'll realize that violence doesn't really solve anything. So many battles. And what comes of it? More battles. It's like we don't want to battle, but we don't know how not to battle. So if you're battling and don't want to battle, maybe try some really good tea, like Jesse's Tea House. Jesse gets his teas straight from small tea shops and tea farmers in China and puts them into his subscription service. Just use the code JessePod for $10 off your first order of $30 or more and stop this endless battling. God damn. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Tea Time with Jesse. I'm Jesse.
I'm Annie.
I'm Mohammed.
And we're talking about comedy in Asia and just life in Asia and figuring out how to be in places as one person when there are other people around and they're different than you, but also kind of like you. Which is, I guess, the theme of it's good that I feel so glad I have comedy as an outlet to do that.
Yeah.
It's like if you don't, you're just like whining. But if it's comedy, it's like, this is art.
I feel like we are a huge diversity card today. We just need a black person.
What is the? I was thinking if there is a flag of brown, white, and
I don't know. What am I? Yellow?
Oh, there you go. You said it, not me. That was the whole point.
Well, this is actually an interesting question. Is like it's surprising like what isn't appropriate. Like you know, coming back to the States, like you couldn't say yellow. Or at least I definitely couldn't.
Yes, but I couldn't either, even though we're dating.
But in China, like I could totally say that. If you said like you know 我是白人，你们是黄人, whatever, like you know you could say that.
But wait, is that something they're familiar with in China? Like they respond to that?
Well, the reason why it's okay is because it's like completely. It's not even archaic. It's like. It's just completely unrelated to real life.
Yes.
So it's like you would never say that because it's not like. Okay, that concept of race is not the way they think about it. Mm-hmm. And so there's no negative emotion tied to it.
Yes.
So people don't get pissed.
That's one thing I like about the freedom of performing in Asia in general. It's like as opposed to even Melbourne, who I had to adjust to, just like we said in the first part, it's like I had to adjust to like, oh, you can step on a landmine pretty easily here. And then you're in trouble. But here in Asia in general, I'm not saying that, go around and say the N-word. But it's like there is a little bit more of understanding or that like less of trigger warnings or trigger words that you have to care for.
Yeah. Or there's different types of triggers. Like I was just thinking about it. Like I've been taking videos being in Taiwan and followers of mine have been saying like, are you going to be able to go back to China now that you said you've been in Taiwan?
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, they don't know. Like, yeah, I'll be fine.
Yeah.
Like,
but I'm sure like those are Americans who are asking you that, not Chinese people.
No,
Chinese people know.
Chinese people know. But also like I thought about it, but I was like, that seems like a little bit silly, but they don't know. Yeah. And then there's also other things that I just take for granted that I know that they might not know. Like for instance, when I'm here, if I want to be very neutral about my experience living in China, I'll tell people that I lived in Beijing for 9 years.
Yes.
Because no one will, like there is a city called Beijing and I live there.
Yes.
It's not wrong and I don't need to make any political
living in Beijing, that's questionable. About the wrong part. Because you probably have 3 lung cancers.
I don't know about that. I mean, I would say if I do have lung cancer, I got like a really high level lung cancer, like very There was a lot of like elite sort of lung cancer.
Yeah.
There was some real good stuff in the air. I had a sketch about this. I did. It was like it was a smog tasting. Like it was like we were like I wrote the script. We never shot it, but I was gonna make like it was gonna be in Beijing and like this is a Taiyuan 2012. Like Shanxi like has a little like Meiwei. It would be like we were gonna have like wine glasses that would like fog in them.
Oh, nice.
With like covered up, and then people would would kind of
back notes of exhaust pipe.
Exactly, but it's like the exhaust pipe note Yeah, I like it because it doesn't overwhelm the smog.
Of course,
it just sounds like a wine douche, but for smog.
Well, I had a question about this because I did a travel show and I don't know much about wines, and so I fell into some faux pas. Sorry, my hair is everywhere. And in your teeth.
Not in the teeth.
The
extra flavor.
They made fun of me for my descriptions, which are too basic, and apparently you're not supposed to describe wine as fruity.
Is that like faux
sweet?
pas?
Yeah, but I was wondering with tea, what are the ones that you just can't say because they're too general?
Okay, I have opinions on this. So my take is that a lot of the tea in the West is like overly. There's sort of like an almost Orientalist romanticization about a lot of the tea stuff, where people feel like they need to know special words or special adjectives. And for me, the reason why I got into
we don't say
tea,
Orientalist anymore.
Oh,
Definitely not from you. You're too white to get away with it. I'm triggered.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But this is the thing. It's like there's this sort of like a mysterious East or whatever we'll say.
Thank you.
The like people think that it has to be a ceremony. People think that it has to all be like like high culture, so to speak. And a lot of that also comes down to the words. Like, do you have fancy words for it? And I feel like a lot of people
tea or whatever. Yeah.
And I feel like a lot of people, it's unfortunate. Like a lot of people don't drink tea because they are worried about not like feeling like you won't go to a wine tasting, you don't know what to say.
Yes.
You might not go to that wine tasting. If you think you're not going to know the words about the tea. So there are like a lot of words I've learned coming back into English that they don't use in China to describe tea. As I said, Taiwan, the sort of the region that the tea is from, or the subtle notes of leather and
Yeah.
And it's like that's not why I got into tea. I got into tea because of this. It's like when I got to China, I realized like people have tea as a social thing. They sit down. You come to my house. There's a tea table on the living room table. We're gonna sit down. We're gonna talk, and it can be high level, but like the adjectives, I don't know. So like it's actually I feel kind of bad sometimes because like my adjectives are not as good as some of the other food people's adjectives on the internet.
Yeah.
Like, I got to get better adjectives.
I wonder why all the like these kind of social like lubricants all have to be toxins when you think about it, because this is still has caffeine. Caffeine is a toxin. So is coffee, and then cigarettes and drinking, or like smoking and drinking, because people also hang out around cigar bars.
Yeah,
and alcohol.
Yeah,
it's all toxins. Why don't people just hang out and have?
It's bizarre. Apparently, there's there's something really weird about being human. It's like we want to hang out, but we can't just hang out.
Yeah, but we have to harm our bodies in the process.
But not every tea has caffeine, or Oolong has a very low level of caffeine.
I mean,
but I
conceptually,
think
it's still like,
But the way that we think about drinks in the West when it comes to like a hot beverage, it's been radical to think about tea as a meditative process. So you're not in a rush to make it, because that's why we have tea bags. We're like, oh my god, I'm in a rush. Like, I'm going to put it in my keep cup and I'm going to drive to work.
And that's the thing that I'm like, I will, like, you say whatever adjective you want about tea, like, I'm not going to cause a problem. But if you're like, I don't have time for tea, I'm like, that is a problem.
Yes.
Like, if you, like, people post on my videos are like, I don't have 15 minutes to, like, sit down and do this. I'm like, that's a problem. Like, you need to get your life checked out. Like, you don't have 15 minutes. Yeah. And it's always somebody on the internet that's posting it on like a YouTube short. And I'm like, I know you have 1 minute because you saw my video. So like, it's like the idea you don't have the 15 minutes is I would call bullshit on that. But even if it's not bullshit, even if you literally don't, that should be a sign you have to change your life. And it's like, and it's way easier said than done. You have to have a certain amount of privilege to have time, right? But it's like, there is something to be said about like we get sucked into overwork. Like in Beijing,
and it's also a point of like bragging, right? It's like people like to say how busy. It's like, oh yeah, I have no time. It's like, yeah, that means you have bad time management. Yeah, it's like that's not.
Yeah, or like the weirdest thing has been because I got to meet a lot of really well educated people that have good income and everything, and they're just like busy as hell.
Yes,
and it's like. Something went wrong here because it's like I think my personal take on this is like in capitalism you have to prove that you earned your money. So you have to be working all the time, because if you have money and you didn't earn it, then like society is like, oh, you're like trust fund baby or whatever. And so people.
This part of the podcast sponsored by the Communist Party.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, I don't know, but like it's weird because like I'm not an anti-capitalist at all, but I'm also not a like I just think like in all things balance, and like the idea that people would spend so much time and energy to be able to do something, with the possible exceptions of like if you're a doctor and people are literally dying if you decide to work 30 hours a week, then maybe you should work more. But like a lot of people are like, if you're like a corporate lawyer, I know friends who are like lawyers and they're like stressed as hell. And I'm like, if you're a good lawyer, like, I mean, I don't know how law firms work, but like, can't you take a couple fewer clients and enjoy your life a bit more, make a little less money? And like they build these, but like they get into this system that the system squeezes these people for all of their labor. And I'm like, it's just like wacko.
That's a good point, because I'm here for 6 weeks and I'm doing some shows, but also it coincides with the holiday break in Australia. So I feel guilty thinking that my friends are like, she's just doing a holiday. She's always traveling. And so, having to prove that you're working and that you're performing and everything, maybe I just need to stop doing that.
Which you don't have to. Exactly. And it's like our culture now stresses so much on like how much money you can collect in a very short period of time. Yeah. And it's just like okay, you can do that, and then you're gonna miss a lot of the key moments that you are in the moment. Like right now, we're traveling around doing shows. That objectively is amazing. The fact that you're able to do that, go to another country, do a show, do something like this, go eat some fish, have some fun. No one is harmed. It's great. And then you're like, oh no, but I'm not making this much money, or like it's like.
I think like I was very lucky that my first real job, I was a Fulbright scholar. I had a year where I was basically given a small amount of money. I was able to pay rent. I was able to eat food. It was not a lot of money, but it was enough. And I was also, this is an interesting first job, forced to not do any other work. They actually make you sign something to say you can't like take the government money, say you're researching, and then just work a job. So like it was in this weird position. My first job was getting to do what I wanted to do, being paid very little, but also not having another job. And I realized that I was like, I guarantee you I'm enjoying my life better than the people who are making the most money I knew out of college. And I was like, and I realized this moment, it was like, I would rather make way less money and have complete control over my time and what I do with my time. And it was good to know that, because I had no idea. Who gets to know that? And so now, like, and especially you see in entertainment, you see this a lot of people get sucked into these sort of like traps where you become so valuable to other people because you can sell the tickets, or you're the only one who knows how to shoot that show. And like, weirdly enough, you need to, like, it's about this question of how do you take a step back and say, you know what, I could make a ton of money if I came out with 10 herbal teas tomorrow, but I don't want to grind like that. I don't want to grind and be mixing teas all day and like turn this from what I love into something that I'm just grinding.
You become like, you become something that you don't really want to be, even if you have the ability to. Because you'll be enjoying it less.
Half of the reason, even like for stuff with this podcast, like I'm glad to be doing this podcast, because I'm like, if this podcast fails, I got to hang out with my friends and drink tea. If my podcast succeeds, my job has now become to drink tea with my friends.
The thing that you enjoy.
That was you're gonna do anyway. And it's kind of liberating in the sense that, like, I need it to not lose tons of money because it would be bad. But I don't need it to make a lot of money.
When you think about it too, I think that's also the core of like a lot of 3 stand-up comics here. The core of like why we do stand-up comedy is because you just want to make people laugh. And if you happen to also turn that to a job, like I enjoy making people laugh. It doesn't matter. It can be a stranger. And I'm like, oh, now I can make 4 strangers laugh, and they pay money to do that. That's ideal. But you're right. Like if I don't have that means to make strangers laugh for money, I'm still gonna try to do it for free.
No one told me it could be a job to begin with. I think maybe things have changed a lot now with the internet. You can see people become stars overnight and then start making bank. But when I first started, I'm like, you can do this as a job. So when I actually started it as a job, everything is amazing. You're like, wow, like I'm here, like 3 people paid. Holy shit! Like I made it. And then
you said in your routine last night you started doing comedy when you were 16.
Yeah,
is that right? What was that like doing stand up at 16? Because I wasn't doing stand up.
Yeah, I rewatched the set recently. I think it was last year. It was like a look back, 10 years later, more than 10, and I was like, that was bad. But that was so encouraging because it was a competition that the Melbourne Comedy Festival started, and there was probably like one or two jokes that still holds up.
Do you remember a joke you did when you were 16?
Yeah,
Could you do
yeah.
one?
Oh.
I hate being the person, as a comedian, I hate being like, tell us a joke.
It's okay. I mean, to be fair to her, we should do it too.
I'll tell you I'll tell you the
okay.
first joke I did.
Yeah, I did a joke about how I was always finding rice stuck to my clothes, and I was like, this is like it just seems to be a specific Asian problem. It's not like other cultures are like, oh look, I found a potato, and I did an Irish accent, and it was bad.
That's not as bad as I thought. You were like, no, it's bad. I thought it was like, you can make that work.
You can probably make that work.
Right.
What about you?
I think from my very first set, which I haven't watched for years, but I remember like a moment of just completely just talking to my friends in the audience, because most of the audience at the open mic were my friends, and completely like alienating the rest of the room. So I'm just talking about this one guy who like hooks up with a lot of girls or whatever. I'm like, he's here, he's with a date. Let's see how he does tonight. And everyone's like, who's this guy? Completely don't understand how stand-up works here. I'm like, this guy fucks, right? And everyone's like, we don't know. We don't know you.
It's like you used your stage time to be like a hype man.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is actually like a really next level thing. Can you imagine? Like that would be such a great, like, interesting date idea. Like, hey, let's go on a date and see my friend do comedy, and the whole day is just about how great you are.
Yeah. That's basically what happened. Not planned.
That was funny.
What about you?
I remember the first joke I wrote in Chinese, and for stand-up so my first stand-up joke I did in English was at an open mic at college, and the whole routine was about one lunch lady. Like one lady who like did the like the cashier. She wasn't even serving the food. She was just the cashier, and her name was Kathy, and she sounded like this. And the moment I did that, everybody at the school knew who I was talking about.
Yeah.
And so she was just like a total like a chaotic person. She was like just this old lady, but she gave no fucks. She would do whatever she wanted. She was like, one time she was like, ringing up my lunch. And then she's like, hooray! I'm like, what happened? She's like, your lunch is $7.77. I'm like, yeah, what does that mean?
She sounds like Krusty the Clown.
And she's like, it's $7.77. I'm like, what does that mean? She's like, it means your meal's free. Get out of here.
Wow.
Nice.
So I just told like a bunch of Kathy stories, and then I sung a version of "Wind Beneath My Wings" in Kathy's voice about being a cashier at my school. It was real.
That's really admirable, because I'm trying to go deeper on a topic. Like that's still something that I haven't learned, where you don't just do one bit and you move on. Whereas you knew how to go deep. You went deep.
Well, I think that there's maybe like it's something that I it's funny. I have unlearned that skill. I think like I did it when I didn't know that it was hard, and then because now I'm like so nervous about wasting time. So now I'm like, well, unless I know the first joke works, I'm not even going to write the tags. But it's like the juice that got you on stage in the very beginning was like, I'm going to go like 12 jokes deep on this. And you never even thought like maybe the first one's going to bomb and I have 11 jokes that are not going to work. But like back then you would just do it, and ironically, like you might even win people over if you just like refuse to get off of the topic. Even though it's not working, but you're like, I came here to talk about Kathy.
Yeah.
You're gonna sit and hear me talk about Kathy.
Our buddy Vivek Mabavani was telling a story about an act he saw at the Melbourne Comedy Festival of a guy who just went on stage and counted to 200 for the whole 5 minutes of his act, and that was the entire act.
It's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yeah, and then it's like the range of emotions that the audience go through. In the beginning, they're like, there has to be a joke, and then after a while they're very angry at him for continuing, and then the last like 20 counts, they're all cheering him on, and then he's like, thank you, good night. I'm like, I'm upset listening to you now.
Well, this is the cool thing about comedy is I really love these things, and to some degree it's a tea as well. I love things that there is no one right way to win.
Yes.
It's just like I feel like so much pressure in the world comes from people thinking there's one right way to win. I have to have the house, I have to have the car, I have to live in the fancy place, I have to have a certain job, I have like and all of that pressure always comes from this idea that it comes from kind of this lack of trust in you understanding what you actually want. Because if you know what you want, you might actually get it. But if you only know what other people want and then try to get what other people want, you're never going to get it, you know? Yeah. And so for the comedy, it's like, I feel like I need to re-embrace that with my comedy. Like, I know I want to be doing this sort of bilingual-ish, you know, multicultural content. And like, it's been a little bit of a struggle in LA because I can do that in the immigrant community, but I can't in the Chinese immigrant community, but I can't do it in comedy clubs. And so I feel kind of bad sometimes that I'm doing what I believe to be good shows, but it's not in a venue that's respected in the comedy scene. And then I go in the comedy scene and I feel like you guys are seeing me at 10% power. Like, you know, like, and I feel like this maybe is one of those things where I need to be like, I just need to accept that if they're not going to come and see my show in the bilingual mix or whatever, they just might not be impressed with what I do. You know?
Yeah.
I guess that's where it helps to start your own shows, but you've done that already.
I mean, I can take also the other side of that argument, which is like, you still with stand-up, the objective, at least for me as a stand-up purist in a way, the objective still has to be make people laugh.
You're right. You're totally right.
Yeah, because, you know, that whole conversation about like how there is no right or wrong way to do stand-up is conceptually correct. But there has to be
you have to be like, yeah.
Otherwise you veer into the territories of Netflix specials that are over like an hour of an actual TED Talk.
Yeah. And
it's like, that is in and of itself entertaining.
Yeah, but it's not. Yeah, it's not.
It's not the tag that you have on it, and it's not that category. And you're like, oh, but I'm doing stand up. Like, no, you're not.
Are you?
Yeah.
Are you doing stand up? You're like you got, you know. It's really funny because like it reminds me of back when I was trying to get my Weibo registered in China, and in order to get the check mark in China, you need to say like what you do. So I had enough followers, and I sent in the check mark, and I was like, they're like, what do you want to be verified as? I say I'm a a stand-up comedian, and they're like, we need a work contract seeing that you get paid to do stand-up, so that we know you're a stand-up. And I'm like, no stand-up has a work contract showing that they got paid.
Or you could do what he does and writes letters from himself.
Yeah, but I have a company. I have a legal LLC in Hong Kong. So every time I'm applying for a visa, including Taiwan visa, they need to have an employer like leave.
Oh yeah.
But I am the only employee in my company.
That's
so
funny.
my letters, and this is still a legally accepted form to write a letter from the MD, who is me, for myself to take leave with the same signature, and they completely accept that.
That's funny.
It's so funny.
That's
it's
so
like,
weird.
we allow Mohammed to leave, and he applied for leave, and we accepted. It's signed Mohammed.
But maybe it's a different Muhammad. Yeah, there's so many Muhammads.
The Taiwan visa lady, literally, I went there, I was late to print the document or whatever, so I went there with the chop. I haven't chopped it yet, I just wanted to show it to her, so I make sure it's correct. She goes like, yeah, it's correct, have it chopped, and I just pulled it out slowly, I went, and then she goes, you're I'm like, I am the only, that's me.
And that's when you take off the mask and it's just your own face.
They like zip it, it's still you. Whoa.
Yeah.
It's so weird though. It's like countries have no trust at all in people. But you just get that one little thing, and then they're like, now I trust.
Which, by the way, there is a little kiosk in front of Central MTR that can literally copy any chop.
No.
Yep.
Oh my god.
Yeah, it's like in Central, right next to the government buildings. It's like I don't think it's illegal. It's probably whatever. The kiosk is running legally. They fix umbrellas and shoes, and they copy chops. This is the three categories.
That's funny.
But the point is that I can make the same exact. The Taiwan visa office is not verifying if I'm the company or not.
Yeah.
I can just take that chop, take it to this guy, make a chop of my own, go back to the lady, and apply for a visa.
That's funny.
The whole system is just stupid.
That's bizarre.
Yeah, we don't have this concept in Australia of like the chop or the stamp or anything.
Stamp,
No, I think
And
that's
the
so
chop
outdated.
is so not complicated. The Hong Kong ones particularly, I show it to you. It's just like, it's a very basic chop.
The mainland ones are legit. Like I remember when I got my
Those are hard. Yeah, the star one.
You got the big heavy stamp, and it's got like serial numbers on it. And oh my god, I like the worst. My worst experience with the stamps in China was I went to the bank and I had to make this bank transfer, and I had to write all of the information by hand. So I was writing all the characters by hand, and I had spent 10 years of education to be able to do this, but my handwriting is still sloppy, right? Because I just didn't learn it growing up. And then I go to the front, I wait in line 20 minutes to go to the front and do the thing, and she's like, yeah, this character, the dot is on the left side, it should be on the right side. I'm like, oh, I have to go all the way back, write it again. Okay, I did it correctly. She's like, okay, great, stamp it. So I take the stamp out and I stamp it, and it's a little smudged. And she's the same person. She knows I just went back and did this, and we both had a moment looking at it. And she was looking at it, and I was looking at it, and we were both like, I'm gonna have to do that again.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go. She's like,
no.
I have to go back and do it again. So I went back a third time, and it's like, you know, now whenever I stamp contracts in China, like I'm like, I know that I could blow it, you know, like, and that gives you the yips. It's like a sports thing. It's like you have a 1 foot putt, but you know that you could blow it, and now you're thinking about blowing it. So every time I stamp a document, and the Chinese, they don't worry about the bump, bump, but it's in my head now forever. And it's like, and if you mess it up, the contract is not legally binding. The signature doesn't matter.
This is, maybe my dad got this from China as a concept, but as a kid growing up, he had a stamp with his signature on it. Like, he was so lazy that he couldn't, like...
No, it's not even lazy. Like, so there's many types of stamps. So there's the company stamp. When I got a company, they gave me a company stamp. They gave a 财务证, the accountant stamp, because that way you can have the accountant approve stuff, but you don't need to give them control over the whole company.
Right, yeah.
Then there's also then there was also the 个人章, the personal stamp.
Yeah.
So for stuff that, like, you want to show that, like, the CEO has approved it, but it's not like a legally binding document, but it is binding in the sense that the CEO has approved it, then you use the 个人章, which is because the signature could be forged.
Yeah.
And the idea is that the stamp, in the old days, like, you know, there were only society was 99.9% peasants. And so there were only a couple people in the whole world that would know what the stamp actually looked like.
Yeah.
So that was your way of stopping forgeries. Was only the King of Joe will know what the King of Wu's stamp looked like.
Yeah, I see. Yeah, no, this was just an actual signature on a stamp.
It wasn't the character.
No. It was like, it's like his name was David Louey. It was just David Louey, and he'd be like, oh, you need a permission slip for an excursion.
That's so funny.
That reminds me when you're telling me about, like, when you're saying that how you can write Chinese, it reminds me of one of my favorite meme formats. You know, the one with like, we're looking on a doctor on a plane, and then the dad's like, they're looking for a doctor, and the guy's like, they're not looking for a DJ, aren't they? So that reminded me of that. When you're saying I can't write Chinese kind of badly, I wanted to nudge her. I'm like, he can write Chinese.
Yeah.
It's so funny. It's like, of all the skills, speaking, reading, writing, like, I spent so much time learning how to write Chinese characters by hand, and no Chinese person will ever put a pen in your hand and write characters, because they assume you won't be able to write, and it would be the most embarrassing thing ever when you write. Also, secretly, I think they're worried they would forget the characters, because they don't write them by hand either.
No one writes by hand anymore.
I felt a little bit like crazy. So when I came to Taiwan, everything here is in traditional characters. I downloaded the traditional characters on my phone. I can type in traditional characters. It feels like cheating. I don't even, I'm like, I don't know how to write that character, but it came out perfectly.
Like, I have the Chinese keyboard, and anytime I want to WeChat my family, you just put in the pinyin and it brings the characters up, and I have enough recognition to be like, yeah, that's the character I want. But if you told me to write it from memory, I wouldn't be able to.
No. There is a better hack, which is Gboard, where you can actually type in English and it translates to Chinese in real time. You don't have to go through Google Translate. That's how I speak fluent Chinese to most of to all of my Chinese friends. They think I'm fluent. I'm typing in.
So it's so good that it's never grammatically wrong.
No. It's the AI is so advanced that I can write like, I'll be there in 10 minutes, and it just does it.
Okay.
I don't have to go through its translation. Just Gboard. Stop using fucking iPhone.
I don't know, man. I talked to, so I had Xiaoma NYC, the language YouTuber, on my channel, and I asked him about this. I was like, are we going to get to the point where AI is so good you don't need to learn a language anymore? And he was like, we're already there for practical purposes. But what the difference is, if you say, I'll see you in 10 minutes, it doesn't mean that these, like, people actually want to hang out with you.
Sure.
Being able to actually speak the languages. It's not even subtle difference. It's like, the type of person who does everything the easiest way is probably also not a very interesting person.
Yeah,
you know?
I see.
So I'm saying you're not very interesting.
I got that.
But you actually, you do put in the work to be able to do that if you want to, but it saves time.
Yes.
And it's also like, so it's funny. I think that there's a lot of these things that, 50 years ago would be completely unthinkable. And I'm like kind of thinking about like what's it going to be like 50 years from now, like especially did you see, it freaked me out as a bilingual comedian when they had those videos of like Taylor Swift speaking in Chinese but in her own voice. Have you seen these?
No.
They have the lips, like they can take the actual like notes of the voice and convert it into the second language. And so she's like, and so it's Taylor Swift talking, but in her voice is like, 我以前在意大利做演出, 然后 like she sounded perfect.
Yeah.
And I was like, Taylor has been studying. But then I also saw they took Guo Gang, like the xiangsheng, the performer, the comedian in China, and they had his thing in English, and it was wacko hearing Chinese traditional comedy in English by Guo Gang with the pacing perfect.
Yeah.
It felt really good, but it didn't hit.
Yeah.
Because it's not going to hit.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, maybe my job as a comedian is still safe.
Yeah, our algorithms, I think, are very different when it comes to the AI stuff, because mine is a compilation of Donald Trump singing Senorita from different that's where I am. That's what I'm impressed by.
You seen that video that went viral of the Trump Hillary Clinton debate where they were both like standing with the microphones and they put them singing karaoke songs?
Yes. So it was something similar like that. It's very funny.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful. That was the best thing that came out of that election. It was like, that literally that video of Teresa Tung sort of. So, couple more questions about the respective comedy scenes. You're in Hong Kong. We heard a little bit about the Australia scene. We didn't hear about the Hong Kong scene.
Yeah.
So what's the Hong Kong comedy scene like right now?
It's changed a lot since before COVID. Like we have had a pretty bad lockdown, like really bad. Lockdown has affected different parts of the world differently, and I think governments handled it to different, varying level of success. Hong Kong just messed it up because the quarantine was so harsh for so long that it just deterred a lot of people from even coming back, or like thinking like, oh, the next one is going to be as bad if you handled it this badly. So what happened is that a lot of the touring comics, the really good ones that we used to get before, because they travel in Asia, you would just make a stop in Tokyo. Usually Tokyo is the grandest stop because everyone wants to travel in Japan. But then we can just call their agents or call them and be like, hey, come to Hong Kong, do a show. It's very hard to do that now. So the problem with the
They don't want to go, or you can't sell the tickets, or what's the...
they don't. They're scared. They don't trust it.
The
anymore.
promoters are like, we've been burned.
Yes.
So
So, but that also means that there is a big discrepancy between the really big acts can come through like Live Nation, and then there is us who are just running local shows, and there is no in between. We used to bridge that gap by making. Oh, Neil Brennan is here for the weekend. Let's get him. And we used to do that. Like
we would like
Hannibal
run
Buress
into
would
his
come
hotel
through.
room and like throw something over his head. He'd wake up, he's on stage, and he's like, I know how to do this.
Correct. Yeah, we've had so many, like we as in Hong Kong, even before my time. Bill Burr came through, Hannibal Buress, Neil Brennan. A lot of these guys would just come through, like, oh, yeah, it's a small show, whatever. Now only Live Nation can do that. No one else can do it because, you need that level of connection. But on the local level, it's different. Before COVID, there was one main comedy club run by a guy who owns the building, so he has like no overhead, and it's quite easy for him to run shows. So now I am the other guy on the scene who's running it full time, and there's a lot of independent guys who kind of work both rooms. And then there is people like Vivek Mabubani, who's kind of like you, completely bilingual. Cantonese. He's an Indian fella who was born in Hong Kong, but speaks Cantonese fluently and English. And he works in both languages. So he's the biggest name. And
I love seeing his stuff in Cantonese, even if I don't understand all of it. Just seeing like, I just like am such a bilingual comedy nerd. There's a little enough of it, I feel you can kind of see it all in the world,
Yeah, and he's also probably the hardest working person I know, period. Like, I'm very close to him, and subtle plug, we do a podcast together.
What's the name of the podcast?
Ho Ho Hong Kong. You can find it on wherever you find the podcast. We've been doing it for 5 years. It's a pretty established podcast.
It's a good podcast.
Yeah. So Vivek and I, we have the occasional guest sometime. But yeah, it's a local scene. There is open mics twice a week. There's weekend shows, usually me and the other promoter run shows over the weekend. And again, the occasional big show. So as we're like, for this period, we have Jimmy Carr coming through. We had Tom Segura just came through. Again, they're run by huge companies.
Do you feel, what's the difference in the vibe between the Hong Kong community and the mainland comedy community?
Hong Kong community, like the comics, are richer.
Yeah.
And that makes a big difference because there's a lot more. I'm throwing a lot of people under the bus here. There's a lot more substance abuse in the Hong Kong scene than mainland. Not for, obviously, part of it is mainland having tighter control over substances.
Strict. You don't want to do anything in mainland China.
Yes, and I'm not going to specify which substance. Can be tea. It can be anything. So you use your imagination. But also that means in Hong Kong you don't have to, like, people are busier because the jobs are very demanding. That
I thought you were going to say because they're like currently using drugs.
I mean, that is true. Definitely. Yeah, that's the thing. That's kind of my point. It's like when you are that busy, you have very limited time to do the drugs and do the comedy and then go through life. And they actually put more value in comedy that way because their time is so limited.
Yeah.
As opposed to the people who are living in, like when I was running in Shanghai, a lot of them are English teachers or like kind of like not as demanding
They have
jobs.
a lot of time.
They have a lot of time. That's it. And they just come and like bum around the comedy club for
Makes
7
me think
hours.
that all their sets are like double time.
Yeah, it's like, although I will say it was like one of the best things about being in the Chinese comedy scene, and I didn't appreciate until after I moved to Hollywood, is you get a lot of stage time.
Yes.
And people are just like nice to each other before and after the shows and everything like that. Like, not saying that everybody in LA is like mean to each other, but it's like everybody in LA is using comedy to get where they want to go. And and the people in China were just like, I'm so glad to have this outlet to be able to perform and to express myself.
But
and
that's a
talk
double-edged sword, I think, because a lot of people, even the really good ones in the Hong Kong or even the China scene, the foreign part, at least the English-speaking comedy, know that they have a ceiling and they're not looking at it as a profession, as opposed to the LA people, when they are actually there's an end goal.
That's the thing, is like there's also a lot of good that comes from the idea that there is a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow somewhere. You know, like if it's just nothing forever for fun for whatever, that's great. We had a good time today and tomorrow, and then you come back 10 years later, it's the exact same thing.
I would love to have a roster of people who are interested in growing their comedy career, as opposed to like right now I have a roster for backstage comedy at my company of like maybe 20 working comics. 15 of them, they're not looking at it as a career. And they're good. All of them are good. And that's a problem, because I'm like, I would rather actually have someone a little bit less good who is interested in climbing a ladder, as opposed to I'm gonna keep doing this until I'm not able to.
Yeah, there's definitely, I think this is something that the improv scene sees a lot more of, is like there's a lot of people who do improv for funsies or whatever, and then keep coughing, just good content.
I'm away from the.
Can we have a short that's just you coughing?
We'll remix it with AI, and it's gonna be a hit.
Speaking of drugs.
Yeah. But it was in the improv scene, like you would have like a really good troupe, and then in China, we would actually have the opportunity to like tour. And then I would be like, in improv, like to be able to tour in improv is like, you're already up at the top. Like if you're touring and doing improv, like it doesn't get much better than that doing straight improv. But I was like, okay, well I have 6 people in a troupe and we can't take all of them. Initially, I thought it'd be a problem of who gets to go. And then in the end, it was like, I can't get enough people who can take the time off of work to go. And so there is, I think, in stand-up, wanting to be making that leap from having the real job and then going to do comedy full time is very hard. In some ways, I feel like I was very fortunate. I started doing comedy full time. I had that research grant where I got a year of runway to do comedy full time. And then even in the beginning, when I wasn't making much money professionally, I still was like, I don't have another job. And so there was a chance to be able to grow.
It's very funny actually thinking about it. The 3 of us are doing comedy full-time for completely different reasons and under completely different circumstances, because she started when she was very young. I was actually I was doing comedy, but until right before COVID, I was working also for bigger companies like Live Nation, running their venues and stuff. So technically that's still under corporation. And then during COVID, when Hong Kong was dead, I picked up a day job doing coffee stuff. But then right when COVID kind of ended, actually immigration came for me and they're like, hey, you have to choose one of the two because I'm not a permanent resident. So that's actually forced me into just having my own company. Otherwise, I would still try to balance everything.
They can force you to do comedy. They can't force you to be funny.
Yes.
But they can force you to say, like, you gotta try.
Yes. And it was...
But that's exactly what you need.
Yeah, exactly. I was like put in a position, I'm like, oh, if I don't choose this now, I would have to give it up or leave Hong Kong, which I don't want to do. But it was like a criminal case. It was a whole deal, and it took a year to get out of. But the point is that now I am just like, that's the only, if I want to do comedy, I can only do comedy.
Wow. So you had to choose between comedy and coffee. And,
well, it was comedy and any other job, like comedy and a day job.
Well, I'm very glad I don't need to choose between comedy and tea, because I have to do both of them. We're just about finished up. Before we finish, though, I do want to do a little bit of a quick lightning round. Before we do the lightning round, though, what did you guys think of the tea?
Great. Was this the same
This is the same
batch?
Yeah,
Or
same.
did it once. The flavor has stayed consistent after. You've probably done it like 10 times.
Yeah, maybe 15 seeds.
Yeah.
so many.
Yeah, because normally you might get 3 good ones and the rest tastes like water.
So
So
really
this
the
is
high
good.
quality tea,
Yeah.
like you get more out of it, and so sometimes people are like nervous. They're like, "What if I don't want that much tea?" I'm like, "Don't drink that much tea. That's fine."
I mean, there is a really easy trick that I'm now figuring out. There's like these small shot cups, are like so easy because you just keep it like
Yeah, it
hot,
keeps hot.
as opposed to having them.
yeah.
I
Yeah,
know
true,
this is very
true.
obvious, but
No,
like
but
I
just
drink
air
my
it.
tea in a mug.
Yeah.
So now I'm like, I should drink my tea in
You should.
this.
The smaller cups, repeated steeps. What also the other cool thing it does is you feel a little bit of a journey of the tea. It starts a little light, it gets stronger, it kind of loosens out a little bit. So it's not just like sort of the same thing over and over again.
And then when it loses flavor, you're in steep trouble. All right.
Yeah.
All right.
Hey, that's that.
We are no longer dating.
All right, lightning round. So I'm gonna just say a question. Like these answers to these questions are like 1 sentence maximum, okay? And we'll go for both of you. So, what was the favorite country you've ever performed in?
Australia.
Okay.
Taiwan.
All right. Oh,
Yeah.
very cool. Very
Yeah.
cool. All right. What was the what was the best room you've ever played in?
Oh, the Palais Theatre in Melbourne, like 3,300 televised. Can't
Can't
claim
beat that.
Yeah.
Shanghai Center in Shanghai. It's like 1,000 theater.
Nice.
Was opening for Jim Gaffigan. So
yeah, that's a good night.
yeah, that was a great night. It was
a
like
good
one of these like everything lined up perfectly, and we had a great time. Yeah.
Favorite thing about being a traveling comedian?
The traveling.
Doing fuck all before the show. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Last night before, I know it's short answer. Yesterday before the show, we played ping pong for about 2 hours.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and having the freedom to do
Yeah.
that just is
I
amazing.
mean,
to
I
me.
played more ping pong than stand up. Like I came
Actually-
in 8 minutes
Yes.
of work. I played ping pong for an hour and a half.
Yep.
You're basically a professional ping pong
I
player
am, yeah.
that funds
doing
their
stand-up on
hobby
the side.
through comedy.
Yes.
Which is great.
Exactly.
And then, like, least favorite room you've ever performed in?
Oh, it's dead now. But my first ever open mic was this place in Footscray, and there were 20 men and then me, and it was like midnight, and it was bad.
Korea. One room in Korea in particular was just like, I felt like everyone after the show is gonna commit suicide, and it had nothing to do with me. They're already miserable people, and I think I made the night worse. It was.
So, these people, I can't help them.
I can't help them.
I came here to
Exactly.
make them laugh, and I can't help
It
them.
didn't. Yeah.
It's like you're a doctor and you have to like take off the things.
Yeah.
I don't know how to tell you this, but you're all dead inside.
Yeah.
No. I'm sure there are better rooms in Korea. You should hire him to go and perform.
Yeah. Sure.
And then we'll say, see if I have any last thing to say. Like, what's do you have a joke that you were sure that would succeed that bombed?
Oh yeah.
Throughout the history of your whole.
Yeah, just like maybe like one joke that you were sure would succeed that bombed.
Oh, can you take this one first?
Yeah, I used to have a bit about how I was dating someone, and I would refer to her by her first name that translates, it's an Arabic name that translates in English, but in English is very offensive. So it sounded like I'm just like making fun of her, not just making fun of her name, but I'm calling her that name.
Yeah.
As opposed to the name just funny translates to, I don't even want to say her name. But yeah, it just sounded like I'm just calling her something.
Yeah.
And I did it a few times. I'm like, I should stop doing
Yeah.
that. Yeah. It's just, yeah. People were like, why are you so mean to her? I'm like, "Sorry."
I think my mind has blacked out all the bad like things I've written. I've
That
written
would be such a good skill to have
so
as a stand-up
many.
comedian.
Yeah, but I mean, I can talk about like the TV show I was doing. I got a complaint for the first time.
Oh yeah,
It
what was that?
Written in by like an international viewer, and we were just riffing in the office ideas about like China had a new policy around the government encouraging young people to make babies, and I'm like nothing gets you hornier than like government mandated sex basically. But I said that it really kills lady boners, and that got a complaint. We had to recut the episode.
Really?
Yeah, like the word lady boner offended too many people.
What?
In my defense, when I was writing that letter, it was because I was trying to hit on you.
Yeah.
It was not
It didn't work.
Yeah, it didn't work. I didn't realize it fucked up so much of it.
Yeah, so I
Didn't
didn't
work.
realize that was going to be a bomb because, like, you know, we're used to being on stage so
Yeah.
uncensored.
Yeah.
Like, my actual first unfiltered version of that was I've never been drier. So now we're like, no, we can't broadcast that. So that was a sanitized version and still, like, no good.
Well, very good. Well, I mean, it was so great to be able to hang out with you guys, and once we turn off the cameras again, we're going to the fish market. So it's going
That's
to be
why
a good
you
time.
mentioned fish.
Yeah.
You're like, you come here, you do some shows, you eat fish. I'm like, what are you talking about?
I'm talking about our literal plan after this.
You did say it super casual. and I'm like,
Yeah.
am I going to call you out on
Yeah.
that? It's like, no, I'll keep going. I knew what you were talking about. But it was great to be able to see you guys. And again, let me know if you're ever in LA. And it's great to be able to share it with you guys as well.
Thank
If
you.
you are interested in the tea, you should go on. And at the time of viewing, I do not know what's in the mystery Taiwan drop. But probably by the time that you see this, it may or may not be a mystery. In any case, if you want Taiwanese teas, they are on the site. The tea set, all of the stuff that you see here is also on the site. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. And just really great to be able to spend some time with you guys. Thank you again. What is socials that people can follow you on?
At Annie Louey, ANNIE Louey.
I'm at the other Mohammed, and that's probably the only handle that is the other Mohammed. So it doesn't matter how like the spelling of Mohammed, you'll find it. The other Mohammed on Instagram.
You'll be able to find them.
You'll be able to find
Very
it.
good. Thank
Yeah.
you guys so much. Have a good one, guys, and enjoy your tea. Have a good one.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.